Hi folks, so we have a full moon in Scorpio at 8:26 p.m. in 4 hours time as I start to tape this. I do have a request before I get into the astrology of this full moon, which is if you are having sound problems with my videos, and specifically the sound being too low, the volume being too low, would you mind just leaving a comment and letting me know, because it will help me. If I've already heard from you that you are having trouble hearing the sound, you're good. You don't need to tell me again. I've already got your feedback. I just want to see if I just want to put it out there so that whether you are having trouble or not, I would just have to get some feedback from people either way, because I'm trying to replicate the issue on my end. I've checked it on my phone, on my computer, on YouTube. I can't replicate it. It might just be that I'm speaking softly for some reason. But if you are, but I believe there's an issue because more than one person has brought this up with me. So there's something here that I need to troubleshoot because it is not an isolated incident. So that's why I'm saying if I've already heard from you, I got it. Thank you for your feedback. If you had not brought it up, I would never have known. But if you have not given me any feedback about sound, whether it is okay, you can hear me okay or not, I know that there are people who can probably hear me okay because I do get comments on my videos, a few comments on my videos. So I feel like you must be hearing something in order to be able to respond to it, and it may not be that bad or that terrible, but irrespective, I would be very grateful if you could just leave a comment to let me know if you can hear things fine or not. And if I've already heard from you, you are not under any obligation to give me that feedback again. I got it. Thank you. Sorry if I sounded ungrateful by saying if I heard from you, I never want to hear from you again. That's not my intention. What I'm saying is I've got it. I actually kind of want to hear from other people either way, because as I've mentioned, I've actually gotten this feedback on my last 2 or 3 videos from more than one person. So I'm trying to figure out what's going on here. And then that way I can identify or isolate a smaller group of people who may be having sound issues and follow up with you regarding technology or something along those lines if it gets to that point. Now, back to this full moon. New moons and full moons happen in opposite signs, which makes sense. The sun is in a certain part of the chart. It takes 30 days to go through that part of the chart, that sign. And during those 30 days, you at least have one new moon when the moon meets up with the sun, and one full moon when the moon is opposite the sun. Sometimes, rarely, you'll have 2 new moons or 2 full moons if the new moon, full moon occur within the first degree and the last degree of a sign, because it takes 28 days, and there are 28 days, 28 degrees, and there are 30 degrees in a sign. So the new moon and the full moon occur in opposite signs. Sometimes the new moon in a sign occurs before the full moon in the opposite sign. So sometimes a new moon will occur in the sign of Taurus, and 14 days later there will be a full moon in the sign of Scorpio. And this rationally makes a lot of sense. These opposing signs define each other, just like night and day define each other, or good and bad define each other, or right and wrong define each other. Opposing signs have or carry opposing principles. So what is in one sign, or rather what is not in one sign, has to exist in the opposite sign, and what is not in the opposite sign needs to exist in the original sign thematically along the same axis. So if Aries stands for me, Libra stands for my partner or the other person. If Taurus stands for my resources, Scorpio stands for the sharing of my resources or my shared resources, whether we're talking about emotional resources or financial resources. If Gemini stands for mundane communication, Sagittarius stands for higher communication. If Cancer stands for home and private life and foundation, Capricorn stands for public life and success and ambition, etc., etc. So, and of course, from a modern Western astrological standpoint, the signs are also carry thematically the same characteristics or similar characteristics as the houses. In traditional astrology, this is not the case. In traditional astrology, a sign is much more a set of characteristics, and a house really refers to tangible things, but irrespective. Sometimes, of course, we will get the full moon first and the new moon second, which is what is happening now. So we have a full moon in Scorpio today, and we're going to have a new moon in Taurus, the opposite sign, on May the 11th. And when that happens, it means that the new moons are happening in the last degrees of the sign, and this is going to be true. The new moon in Taurus is going to be at about 21, 22 degrees, and the full moon in Scorpio is about 7 to 8 degrees. So the full moons are happening in the earlier part of the degrees of the sign, and the new moons are happening in the latter part of the degrees of the signs. And so you've got the full moons happening first, and the new moons happening 14 days later. And for a full moon to occur, the sun at the very least needs to be in the sign where the new moon will occur. So right now, we have the sun in Taurus. We also, as it happens, have Uranus, Venus, and Mercury in Taurus. So we've got 4 planets in Taurus. And the sun and the moon are going to meet up 14 days from now in Taurus at about 21 and 22 degrees and create a new moon. We've already got 4 planets in Taurus. And as these planets create a focus on Taurian themes and the house where Taurus occupies in our chart and what that house stands for, before we get to the new moon, we deal with this full moon in Scorpio. And when that happens, it's as if the full moon in the opposing sign creates some sort of a crisis, some sort of an epiphany, some sort of a clarity that has to be dealt with, some sort of an emotional hurdle that has to be dealt with to clear the decks for whatever is happening in the sign where the new moon is going to occur and develop. We already have these planets in Taurus, but then we get the new moon in the last third of Taurus on May the 11th, which means that Taurian energy carries on for another 4 weeks after May the 11th. So whatever it is that the Sun, Mercury, Venus, and Uranus are setting up right now, and we are percolating like a teapot in Taurus right now with everything that they are brewing, we need to somehow clear the energies, deal with scorpionic energies, have kind of a scorpionic meltdown, have the visibility associated with it, clear this opposing principle before we can get back to really focusing on Taurus again, which as time goes on and as we head towards May the 11th, the new moon, we will clear, especially because all these planets in Taurus are also squaring Saturn in Aquarius. And Saturn squares this full moon also, although there are a couple of other transits that are closer, specifically with this full moon. This full moon opposes Uranus in Taurus. The Sun and Uranus are approaching. The Sun is getting closer and closer to Uranus. And also Mars in Cancer trines this full moon, supports this full moon. Okay, that's a lot of sort of factual information. So what does all this mean? Well, first and foremost, a full moon, the disk of the moon is full, implies an intensification of activity or emotion. When we're dealing with a full moon in Scorpio, it's probably emotion. When we're dealing with a full moon in a sign that is ruled by Mars, a sign that the moon is not happy with, it's likely that it's sitting on a certain amount of unrest or discontent or even unhappiness. And the sign of Scorpio is associated with deep emotional truths, especially as they have to do with relationships. Some of these truths can be financial, but even the financial truths are likely to have some sort of issue of either professional or personal intimacy at stake, or that needs to be considered behind it. The sign of Taurus is the sign of independent abundance, our own ability to manifest our sense of plenty, our own sense of self-worth and self-esteem, independently, who we are, and how we project that into the world. And it has an emotional component of emotional self-worth and independence, and it has a financial component. of financial independence and self-worth. When you come to Scorpio, it is about how our emotional resources and financial resources are being shared with others, which they have to be. Whether you're dealing with taxes or credit or loans or debt, whether you're dealing with issues related to inheritance or legacies, whether you're dealing with roommates, whether you're dealing with anybody with whom you share money, anyone who owes money to you, anyone who money is owed from you, spouses, marriage partners, issues related to the health, the fundamental health of committed partnerships and contracts. If a contract states that this is how finances are going to be shared, then is that what's happening? Is something else happening? Is someone stealing? Is someone not? Is someone overgiving? Is someone undergiving? Codependencies, that is the Scorpionic word, and the emotional truth within a relationship, what is actually going on, what is open to analysis, Scorpio being very much a sign that is investigative and open to psychological work and therapy and analysis, and how relationship spaces are occupied and what is at the heart of them and what are the power dynamics within them and who is controlling what and who is managing what and what is really going on and what are our patterns, and etc., etc., etc. Whereas Taurus, the opposite sign, is about who am I and what do I have and how do I hold my boundaries and who am I independently and how do I go about my own business of taking care of myself. Both of these are important and essential when it comes to relationships. And of course, I will tell you that more often when it comes to relationships, it is these Taurian and Scorpionic principles that are at play more than the Aries Libra principles, which are by definition astrologically concerned with relationships. So generally speaking, if I did not have your chart in front of me and if you don't know your chart, this is a full moon of emotional and financial consideration. What is going on for you independently, financially, and in relationship, and what is being revealed, perturbed, brought to the surface, brought to completion, brought into the limelight when it comes to your shared resources and your emotional resources and intimacy with others. And how, with full moons, on the positive side, there can be publicity, you can be pushed into the limelight. Listen, the full moon, I think, for example, someone like Anthony Hopkins has a Capricorn ascendant, which means that at the time of the Oscars, the full moon was in Libra, 10th house of career. It was not completely full, it was expanding. But the full moon is in Scorpio in the 11th house, but the moon at the time of the Oscars was in the 10th house of career, right? So it can push certain things into the limelight or bring some sort of recognition there. It can bring a contract to completion or a project to completion. It can mean departures. It can mean sort of big dramatic culminations. But in a more challenging way, it can be an emotional meltdown or a revelation or, I talk about sort of the milk boiling and coming to the surface. With Scorpio, it could be that a lot of that is internal and kind of runs deep and watery, and there are things to consider. And because we're having a Scorpio full moon, it could very much be that the things that are being considered right now with a full moon before a Taurus new moon have to do with you taking stock of where things are at in your relationships with others emotionally and financially before you can start to do the work that you need to do that is related to your own independence, the pursuit of your own independent goals, the managing of your own independent bottom line, the dealing with your own independent boundaries in relationships. There's a meditation. This full moon is a meditation of things that may bring issues related to your self-worth and how you hold that self-worth in place when it comes to financial and emotional entanglements. And whatever this full moon brings up could make you ponder and think about how you feel about these entanglements, so that as you continue to do the Taurian work that Venus and Mercury and Uranus and the Sun are all encouraging, and the new moon on May the 11th inaugurates the action related to the sign of Taurus and this kind of independent work, it could be that this full moon brings up things that makes you think about or reach some sort of conclusion about or deal with some unrest about intimacy and entanglements, so that you get more data and more to deal with and process before you do the personal independent work. I hope that's making sense. So themes of emotional and financial entanglements, and there is the potential. My last video still applies to this full moon reading because we're talking about two sets of squares still being active. Out of the two, there are two transits that I really count as important with this full moon. Opposite Uranus. So the theme of independence is still pronounced with this full moon. It is leading you to independence. But right now, during this full moon, it is going to make you think about, how am I entangled with others? Scorpio is also traditionally a sign of transformation and change, and it is also the sign of death. So from a modern Western astrological perspective, traditional astrologers may well disagree, and may well say, what is in the 8th house, leave in the 8th house, don't combine it with Scorpio. I'm going to just put that in there, given the climate of the time and what we're dealing with pandemic-wise in so many ways. It's a dark sign. It's a dark full moon, and the moon is not happy in Scorpio. In order to be emotionally content, planets like Venus and the moon almost require and are happy with glossing over and ignoring and not dealing with the murky emotional truths that a planet like Mars, for example, requires you to contend with. So, a Scorpio full moon makes it inevitable for you to face and at least contend with, or at least intuitively deal with, this watery flow of, on the one hand, these planets in Taurus are encouraging independence and boundary setting and going after your goals in a methodical and a practical way. And then this full moon comes up before the new moon in Taurus to say, hold on. Let's take into account where things are at in terms of dependence and what is working for you and what is not working for you. Let's encode that with this full moon trining Mars, that there are actions that you can take around the assertion of boundaries or actions in general. Mars is in Cancer. It's going to be hard for Mars to take the kind of action that it does because Mars is not in its element in the sign of Cancer. Mars likes direct action. The sign of Cancer likes indirect action. So there is a bit of that conflict, but I'm going to do a separate video on Mars in Cancer, and we'll talk about that there. As far as this full moon is concerned, at the very least, it is supporting action and drive that can be taken in order to deal with some of the unrest that is going to come from this meditation on dependence and codependency. It opposes Uranus, which absolutely brings into light what is opposing your independence, financial and emotionally, and clearing the deck with this meditation so that by the time you get to the new moon in Taurus 2 weeks from now, you are so much clearer and you are giving yourself permission to move forward in Taurian ways, which is the agenda of the time. Okay, the full moon is ruled by Mars and Pluto. Mars is in Cancer, ruled by the moon, so we're back to the moon as being important and unrest. Pluto is in Capricorn, ruled by Saturn, which is in its own sign of Aquarius, which is also co-ruled by Uranus. So Uranus comes into this equation again as with Saturn, and there's a square there, and the planet Venus gets involved. Luckily, Venus is in Taurus, so Venus is dispositing Uranus. So we've got the moon, Saturn, Uranus, Venus as playing important roles here. We already know the full moon is opposite Uranus. Venus is already in Taurus, encouraging financial and emotional independence, even within relationships, and asking you to think about your sense of self-worth and who you are in relationships and what is the balance of power in your relationships. Saturn in Aquarius is squaring Uranus and Taurus. A lot of this independence and quantum leaps where Taurus sits in your chart is dependent on how you take yourself and your potential seriously, where Aquarius sits in your chart. Saturn and Uranus are squaring each other this year, and asking you not to fall into the path of least resistance and make the same kind of errors again that you may have by not holding, by falling into patterns and beliefs that are not serving you and not serving your potential again. Issues related to potential and self-worth and independence are very powerful at the time of this full moon. And where are your goals? Here's where it's at. Are your goals being supported or not? Are your goals being enabled or not? Your independent goals within relationships, financially. And who is enabling them? And who is not enabling them? Who or what is a hindrance when it comes to financial and emotional entanglements? And who or what is a foundation? That is what this full moon is about. And it may not be a meltdown, it may not be loud, but it is going to be present in this kind of, it's a kind of full moon that's not going to let you sleep at night very comfortably, emotionally. You're going to be percolating. You might be thinking about your finances and your issues related to your own self-worth and manifesting abundance. And, you know, Scorpio can be about clients. It can be about business partners. And what is the give and take there for you? Who's taking advantage of whom? What's the balance of power? It doesn't just have to be a marriage partner. It doesn't have to be someone else you're financially and emotionally entangled with, a friend or a family member. It can be business. It can be all of the above. Okay? Remember that the next 3 or 4 days after full moon are prime time for being productive, because the balance between the sun and the moon is in an ideal place to get things done. So if all of a sudden you find over the next 4 days that you're ready to go and take some action, go for it. Prioritize any meditation or thought about your sense of self-worth and how it is being valued or devalued in close personal and business relationships, or business and personal relationships where there's a codependency. Prioritize thinking about that, because that thinking is going to be fodder. That thinking is going to be the soil on which the new moon in Taurus is going to grow. And we need to give that new moon its due, because, you know, it's a new moon in Taurus. Also keep in mind that independently, the one aspect that is really important with this full moon that is being encoded is the sun conjuncting Uranus. Again, your independence and your quantum leaps of growth where Taurus is in your chart is dependent on how you process this full moon and what actions you take over the next couple of weeks around it that allow you to move towards greater independence. And the third aspect that this full moon makes a little too distant, it's the square with Saturn is being talked about a lot, and you can't ignore it. But the opposition to Uranus and the trine with Mars are closer with this full moon. But the full moon is being squared by Saturn. Uranus is being squared by Saturn. The sun will square Saturn on May the 3rd, before the new moon. So it will happen in the next 2 weeks. And that Saturn square goes back to, and I'll put a link to this video once I'm done processing this one, this question of what actions need to be taken in a disciplined and a rigorous manner where Aquarius sits in your chart that allows for the Taurus part of your chart to bloom. What, if you don't know your chart and you want me to talk more generally, what do you know logically that needs to be done? Aquarius is the most logical part of the chart. Aquarius is not a sign that enjoys dreaming. Aquarius is not a sign that Aquarius, we're seeing this kind of Aquarius Taurus square so much play out, for example, when it comes to discussions around vaccinations. Aquarius is a sign of medical progress. Aquarius innovation is what brought us from, the Iron and the Bronze Age into, out of the Stone Age into the Iron and Bronze Age and into sort of the ancient civilizations. That it's the technological innovation that we rely on. And Taurus tends to be very slow and steady. Aquarius is preoccupied with innovating what Taurus is trying to do in some ways. And there's a tension between the two. But there's something about this idea. It's not about following the trodden path. It is about following, Uranus is such an interesting sign. It is at once creative and disruptive. It's like what Amazon did to the shopping business. It's like what Netflix did to the movie rental business. It is a reinvention. It is a quantum leap, but it is technical and logical. And so whatever it is that you're trying to manifest independently may require logical, inventive solutions that are creative but are totally grounded in reality. And you may know it's not about following the beaten or the trodden path necessarily, because that is not always. It is about questioning. It is about what you know. It is about examining with Aquarius where you have followed the path of least resistance and maybe held your value or held certain things too low and not taken grounded leaps of faith. It's not about dreaming in faith. Dreaming in faith has nothing to do with this full moon. Nothing. Nothing. This is a full moon that is trying to create progress, but it is a full moon that is asking you to examine with the full moon's magnifying lens your financial and emotional codependencies so that you can move forward and manifest whatever it is that you're trying to manifest when it comes to your goals. And some part of that is dependent on this Uranian. There's got to be a better way to do this. But the better way is not the intuitive dreamer, I'm going to take a leap of faith way. The better way is, how do I get from here to there? And what is the most data-driven, inventive, scientific, technical, what is the most, Uranus, it's so weird. On the one hand, it's data-driven, and yet on the other hand, it is creative and inventive. It is innovative, but it is grounded. It is ruthlessly grounded. I am going to re-summarize and pull back from the Uranian energy, from the Aquarian energy, which plays an important role in this. Remember that the full moon is in Scorpio, which is ruled by Mars in Cancer, but also Pluto in Capricorn. So Saturn in Aquarius is playing an important role in this full moon in a variety of different ways. But ultimately, I just said this and I will say this again. Ultimately, if you need to take anything away from this full moon video without getting too trapped into all these other signs and these considerations, sit with what is being brought up to you internally. And with Scorpio, it's going to bubble up from the inside, and determine who is helping you towards your goals and who or what is hindering you towards your goals. And the who or what has to do with financial and relationship entanglements. It could mean looking at friends, family, marriage partners, business partners, clients, and somewhere at the bottom of this is a question of self-worth and how that self-worth plays out in relationships. We got there. If you like this video, found it useful, feel free to share it. Please feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel and click on the bell icon next to the subscribe button so you know when I do new videos. My contact information is going to be in the description box once I'm done processing this video, so you can inquire about rates for personal readings, or if you want me to make an easy to read version of your chart that tells you which sign is in which house and what house those houses stand for, you can inquire about rates for that as well. Do not send me your personal information until you get my rate information and you're clear that you want to proceed. Okay? Thank you. Until next time.